Cleopatra, one of the most famous women in history. She was an Egyptian queen who lived over 2,000 years ago, yet her name continues to be relevant today. But what's behind the name? What kind of person was Cleopatra? What did she do that made her so important to history? You'll find out in today's episode, so stay tuned. Welcome to the channel. Cleopatra was born on the 6th of July in the year 69 BC. She was the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt and the last pharaoh of ancient Egypt. Her parents were King Ptolemy XII and his sister Cleopatra V Tryphena. The Ptolemies were a Greek dynasty that ruled Egypt after the death of Alexander the Great. They spoke Egyptian, Greek, and several other languages. Although Cleopatra is usually depicted as an Egyptian in popular culture, she was actually Greek Macedonian by descent and ethnicity. When Cleopatra was born, Egypt was still a kingdom within the larger Hellenistic world. The Greeks had conquered Egypt centuries before her birth, and their language, customs, and culture dominated. Nevertheless, Cleopatra made efforts to connect with her Egyptian subjects, something the Egyptians had not done for centuries. It's thanks to these efforts that we know what Cleopatra looked like. Based on the few surviving portraits, Cleopatra appears to have been strikingly beautiful. Most scholars agree that Cleopatra possessed captivating features and an unmatched intellect. According to Roman historian Plutarch, her eyes were almond-shaped and sparkled with unusual brilliance. The expression in them was both penetrating and intense. However, there are no authentic contemporary portraits of Cleopatra. All of the images widely circulated as being of her are actually modern artistic depictions based on a handful of coins, busts, and statues from the time period in which she lived. When Cleopatra was born, she and her twin brother Ptolemy XIII were named co-regents. However, it's believed that Cleopatra was the one in control. The siblings shared the throne until Ptolemy XIII was killed in 51 BC at the age of 28. As the last pharaoh of ancient Egypt, Cleopatra held both political and religious power. In those days, the rulers of Egypt were considered divine, and they were expected to uphold the cult of the pharaoh. Part of this responsibility included performing religious ceremonies and maintaining the sanctity of the temples. As a child, Cleopatra was groomed for greatness and tutored in a wide variety of subjects. According to Roman historian Plutarch, Cleopatra learned the art of diplomacy early on when she and her brother had to work together to rule the kingdom. They also enjoyed hunting wild animals together, and Cleopatra excelled at horsemanship and sword fighting. But despite their close relationship, the siblings eventually fell out. This happened when Ptolemy decided to marry another woman instead of Cleopatra, probably because he didn't want to marry his sister. Plutarch wrote, "The king now wished to marry the sister of his deceased wife and was violently in love with her. Cleopatra was alarmed and frightened lest her father should prefer her no longer to her sister or even to some other woman, and she resolved to put an end to this danger by taking the kingdom away from her brother." When Ptolemy tried to seduce Cleopatra, she called her guards and had her brother put to death. Afterwards, she took the title of pharaoh and became the sole ruler of Egypt. However, she wasn't accepted by everyone. Much of the Egyptian population favored Ptolemy and blamed Cleopatra for his death. A few years later, Cleopatra met Roman general Julius Caesar while he was visiting Alexandria. The two quickly fell in love and had a son together named Caesarion. Unfortunately, their romance was cut short when Caesar was assassinated in Rome. After hearing about her lover's death, Cleopatra went into mourning. She refused to leave her bedroom and allowed her grief to consume her. Soon afterwards, her lover's adopted son Octavian invaded Egypt. To protect himself against Octavian's armies, Cleopatra's lover's assassins formed an alliance with King Herod of Judea. While Octavian was able to defeat Cleopatra's allies, he failed to conquer Egypt. So he and Cleopatra continued their battle for control of the country. During the war, Octavian blockaded Alexandria, but Cleopatra managed to escape the city by ship. However, a storm destroyed her fleet and she was forced to flee to a small coastal town. There, she sent envoys to Octavian asking him to negotiate a peace treaty. He agreed to meet with her, but only if she submitted to him. Instead, Cleopatra chose to take her own life. She allowed an asp, a type of poisonous snake, to bite her so that she wouldn't be captured alive. Because Cleopatra had chosen to kill herself rather than submit to Octavian, he punished her harshly. He confiscated her fortune, banished her family, and prohibited her worship in the Egyptian temples. Even though Cleopatra's body was interred in a tomb, the site was never discovered. Historians believe it could be the same tomb where her lover was buried. Cleopatra is considered one of the most intelligent people in human history. She was well-versed in science, mathematics, engineering, literature, politics, and religion. She was also very charming and knew how to manipulate people to get what she wanted. The last pharaoh of ancient Egypt, she left an indelible mark on history and has remained one of the most iconic figures since her death. In 48 BC, Cleopatra met Roman general Julius Caesar, and they fell in love. Soon she became pregnant and gave birth to a son whom the couple named Caesarion. This union was controversial because Cleopatra was married to her brother at the time. This was common practice among members of the Ptolemaic dynasty, as it helped keep their bloodline pure. However, when Cleopatra conceived Caesarion, she was no longer with her brother. Therefore, the child's paternity was called into question. According to Plutarch, Caesarion bore an uncanny resemblance to Caesar, and some believed he really was the child of the Roman general. Caesar was even proclaimed Caesar of Rome, though he never traveled to the capital to take part in public life. There are many theories about why Cleopatra chose to align herself with Rome. One theory is that she wanted to protect her kingdom from outside invaders. The Ptolemaic kingdom had been invaded many times throughout its history, and Cleopatra was eager to prevent another invasion. By making friends with the most powerful military force in the Mediterranean, she felt confident that her kingdom would be safe. Another theory is that Cleopatra was motivated by personal gain. She may have been attracted to the power and prestige that came with being allied to Rome, or she may have simply wanted to expand her own influence. Whatever her motivations, the alliance between Cleopatra and Rome would have a profound impact on the future of Egypt. Most accounts state that Cleopatra committed suicide by allowing an asp, an Egyptian snake, to bite her. However, according to a different account, Cleopatra was given a sleeping draught by a guard named Charmian, who was also her lover. There are conflicting accounts about how Cleopatra died. Some say she willingly embraced death, while others claim she was murdered. A fragment of a letter written by Roman statesman and philosopher Pliny, the Younger suggests that Cleopatra was murdered by a member of her own court. However, we can't be sure whether this is true or not. No one knows exactly how or why Cleopatra died. Some historians believe that she was indeed bitten by an asp, while others argue that she drank a vial of poison. However, the exact circumstances surrounding her death remain unknown. If Cleopatra hadn't been killed by an asp, she may have ruled Egypt for many more years. However, it's unlikely that she would have been able to keep her kingdom independent. Rome was a powerful empire that had a big influence on the Mediterranean. Eventually, Rome would conquer Egypt and make it a province of their empire. If Cleopatra had lived longer, she may have been able to resist Rome's influence for longer. However, it's unlikely that she would have been able to prevent her kingdom from being conquered. So what do you think about Cleopatra? Do you believe she was the victim of a murder plot, or did she take her own life to avoid capture? Let us know your thoughts. That's all for today's episode. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss out on any of our future videos. Have a good one and see you next time.